Each year, Loewe, one of the world's major luxury houses, creates a project that extends its expertise in leather to a new medium. This year, the house explores the act of weaving with artists from around the world. An interweaving of tradition and experimental techniques sat alongside woven vases, baskets, and bags.
Welcome to Writing the Future, Basquiat and the Hip Hop Generation, celebration of the artists who transitioned from the train system into downtown galleries and changed the world of art, music, fashion, dance, forever. This piece here is a masterpiece, famous soup can piece. Shout out to Andy Warhol and the art world by Fab Five Freddy. And it sets us up for the bounty that we have inside the gallery today. Hip-hop culture is multidisciplinary, has the famous 4 elements of turntabling and breakdancing and subway writing and rapping. And all of those things exploded in the late 70s, early 80s, found their way to the market in the music industry and the art world. And the exhibition, Writing the Future, Basquiat and the Hip Hop Generation, includes many of the artists who were part of that explosive initial scene. Fab Five Freddy, Futura, Lady Pink, Lee, Cool Core, Toxic, A1. And these were all friends and collaborators and hangers-outers together in that moment. Yeah, these 2 rooms, music, big screens, are joined. This is really the place where it all comes together in terms of the multidisciplinary aspect, because you've got representations of the work folks did in fashion, as well as visual art, and then in cinema, album making, record making, album cover design. Jean-Michel's got a football helmet with patches of hair. In this room too. So you really get to explore the consciousness, the artistic consciousness, kind of the zeitgeist, of the moment where these artists just felt like any medium was theirs to really practice their magic on.
Hello, I'm Nina Del Rio, Vice Chairman and Head of Museum, Private, and Corporate Art Advisory here at Sotheby's. And I'm so delighted to welcome you to this special event today, which is part of Sotheby's Museum Spotlight Series and presented in partnership with Loewe. Today, we're exploring the Museum of Fine Arts Boston's landmark exhibition, Writing the Future, Basquiat and the Hip Hop Generation. Jean-Michel Basquiat was one of the most influential artists of the 20th century. And on May 12th, his painting Versus Medici will star in the Contemporary Art Evening Auction here in New York, where it will be offered with an estimate of $35 to $50 million. An extraordinary work executed in 1982 when the artist was just 22 years old. Versus Medici is among Basquiat's most forceful visual challenges to the Western art establishment, in which the young artist boldly crowns himself successor to the artistic throne as established by the masters of the Italian Renaissance. The MFA Boston's exhibition, Writing the Future, delves into the work of Basquiat and his peers. And we are so honored to have 4 of his contemporaries speaking today: the extraordinary artists Fab Five Freddy, Futura, Lee Quiñones, and Lady Pink. And now I'd like to hand it over to Liz Munsell, co-curator of the exhibition and moderator of our event today.
Hello, everyone. I'm Liz Munsell, Lorraine and Alan Bressler, Curator of Contemporary Art here at the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. Today, we'll be discussing the group exhibition, Writing the Future, Basquiat and the Hip Hop Generation, on view at the MFA Boston until July 25th. The post-graffiti moment in 1980s New York marked the transition of street art from the city walls and subway trains and onto canvas and into the art world. Jean-Michel Basquiat became the iconic frontrunner of this transformational and insurgent movement in contemporary American art, which resulted in an unprecedented fusion of creative energies that defied long-standing racial divisions in the art world. In our exhibition, which I co-curated with the incredible writer and musician Greg Tate, we argue that post-graffiti is one of the most culturally impactful yet under-recognized movements in contemporary art history. And we have Jean-Michel and his contemporaries, some of whom are here tonight, to thank for that. The exhibition features Basquiat's works in painting, sculpture, drawing, video, music, and fashion, alongside works by his contemporaries and sometimes collaborators. A1, Eero, Fab Five Freddy, Futura, Keith Haring, Cool Core, LA2, Lady Pink, Lee Quiñones, Ramel Z, and Toxic. Throughout the 80s, these artists fueled new directions in fine art and design and music, driving the now global popularity of hip-hop culture. To discuss this extraordinary phenomenon, I'm delighted to have with us tonight four very remarkable artists featured in this exhibition. Joining us from Harlem, we have Fab Five Freddy. Freddy was a key driver in New York's 1980s downtown cultural scene, which was instrumental in elevating graffiti into a full-blown movement that would eventually give birth to the global movement of street art and hip-hop. In addition to his visual art, Fab co-produced, starred in, and composed the music for the cult classic film Wild Style, and went on to direct music videos for numerous hip-hop stars like Snoop, Nas, Queen Latifah, and others. Today, he continues to make visual art and produce and direct projects for film and television, such as his influential recent film, The Grass is Greener, about America's complicated relationship with cannabis. Fab Five Freddy is a Burning Man board member, and in September will be taking part in a benefit auction for Burning Man at Sotheby's. Hello, Fab, welcome.
How you doing? Nice to be here, Liz. This is great.
Joining us from upstate New York, we have Lady Pink. Born in Ecuador and raised in New York City, Lady Pink was well known as the only female capable of competing alongside the boys in the graffiti subculture on trains. While still in high school, she was already exhibiting paintings in art galleries, and at the age of 21, she had her first solo show at the Moore College of Art. Lady Pink's work was recently featured in a major solo exhibition at the Museum of Graffiti in Miami, and today she continues to paint and teach muralism to young people. Welcome, Pink.
Hello, Liz. Thank you for having me.
In Brooklyn, we have Futura. Together with his peers tonight, Futura was among the first graffiti artists to be shown in contemporary art galleries in the 80s, when he also collaborated with the band The Clash on their album covers and performed live graffiti during their concerts on tour in Europe. In recent years, he has used his creative talents to merge visual art and design, working in partnership with a range of luxury and streetwear brands, including Supreme, Nike, BMW, and Off-White. His work has been exhibited at museums such as MoCA LA, MoMA PS1, and the New Museum. He recently had solo exhibitions, his first in his native New York in a couple decades, at Eric Firestone Gallery and the Noguchi Museum in Queens. Hi, Lenny. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Liz. Great to be with you. Thank you, Sotheby's, and very happy to be here. Thank you.
And lastly, making a surprise cameo from inside the exhibition in Boston, we have Lee Quiñones. Lee came to be called the King of New York by fellow graffiti artists for his evocative, moralizing murals and whole car protest pieces. Together with his friend and collaborator Fab Five Freddy, Lee headlined the first exhibition of graffiti art outside of the US, the Fabulous Five show, in late 1979 in Rome's La Medusa Gallery. Lee continues to paint and exhibit in Europe, Asia, and North America today, and he has an upcoming solo exhibition at Charlie James Gallery in Los Angeles in June. Welcome, Lee.
Thank you, Liz, and the whole MFA team here in Boston, and of course the Sotheby's house. Thank you very much.
Wow, everybody, what an honor to be here with you all. Legends in the room. You all have creative careers spanning decades. How did you first become involved in making art? Let's throw to Lee first.
Well, I mean, I was always fascinated and drawn to film, cinema, the moving image. And thus later on the moving vehicle, the trains. But as a child, I loved film. I loved all the films that my mother took me to, and also her love for film and acting at that time. So there's many films from the 60s and 50s that I was watching on TV, and some that I went to at debuts, you know, basically opening nights with my mother back then. So it took me, you know, I was drawn to that moving image, and also the fact that I was drawing since I was 5 years old, and I was very captivated by the science fiction Japanese films of the 50s and 60s, watching them on TV. So I think those two collided and came to the conclusion of creating art in many ways, more than one.
Moving art, amazing. Lenny, Futura, how about you? How did you come to making art?
Well, I guess I could say it was my destiny, maybe, because I didn't begin thinking of myself as an artist. I was in junior high school into graphic art, if you will, and when I got into the high school level, I remember there's a school in New York City called Art and Design, and I couldn't get into it. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm a late bloomer as far as getting into all this, but once again, it's worked out pretty good for me.
Lady Pink?
I started also as a very small child. I was doing paint by numbers, and my middle school teacher, they encouraged me to build a portfolio so that I could get into the High School of Art and Design. Unlike Futura, I had a mentor. My middle school teacher saw there was some promise. But I was already in high school on the road to being a legal artist, trying to major in architecture of all things, when I took up with a group of fun vandals and graffiti writers. These guys were intent on getting into the subway trains and painting that up, and I found it extremely exciting and just thrilling. And it's the reason why graffiti was invented, was by kids just having fun and having thrills and kicks and giggles. And I had no idea it was going to turn into a career. As I was starting to paint the subway trains, the galleries were in full bloom. We were exhibiting, we were doing documentaries and films and books, and it was a whirlwind of activity going on while I was still in high school. So I think my career was already set.
Amazing. Fat Five Freddy, how about you? How did you get into making art?
Wow. Well, I guess like most kids and probably the other, you know, fellow artists here, I mean, I started out trying to draw cartoon characters, you know, Marvel superheroes and stuff like that. And then I guess for me, so I was doing that from a little kid. I had a really interesting background and really a lot of smart folks in my house. Max Roach, the jazz musician, was my dad's best friend. And so all these interesting guys, interesting conversations. And I just thought the idea of then being an artist, like literally, was an exciting thing. I guess the first thing I wanted to do as a young kid was be an architect. I remember realizing that every space we're in, somebody designed how wide, how high the ceilings were going to be. And so that was obviously a form of creation, but then figuring out a way to, you know, to like make art and make film and do all these things became a real motivating part of my life, really, really young and early on.
So the exhibition at the MFA focuses on a period in which each of you moved from spray painting on city walls and subway trains to painting on canvas and showing in art galleries. So even though your work on canvas was legal, of course, you were and still are often labeled as graffiti artists by critics and the art world. Do you consider yourselves to be graffiti artists? Lady Pink, let's start with you.
No, I absolutely do not call myself a graffiti artist. I haven't done actual illegal graffiti in decades, so I have no right to call myself that. I think we called ourselves that when we were really doing graffiti on the subway trains, on the walls, and such, and that was our education. So we still do not choose to be called by what we were as children. We grew up to be just artists. Painters, if you need to describe what we do, but we have no control of labels, and nowadays we're being called street artists. So, whatever.
Futura, what did being part of this graffiti scene back in the 80s mean to you as a young person, you know, coming of age in New York?
Well, you know, the elevation of our school and let's say 1980 as a marker was kind of really interesting, I think, for all of us, because it was the surfacing of what we were doing to other media, you know, like alternative spaces, more specifically Fashion Mode in the Bronx, I think, was the first breakout for us locally to have a space to show our work. Pink was in that exhibition, curated by Crash, Days as well, and Lee. But it was the birth of, you know, us starting to make real work. I believe this is from '81. And this is the beginning of my abstraction. I'd already done the break train in 1980, but I was supporting my visual abstraction with these characters that were now arriving. So, yeah, you know, I was just finding my foot in that history that, as Pink said, we were all kind of moving away from, and the labeling of graffiti writer, graffiti artist, you know, it's kind of irrelevant, really. It's in the eye of the beholder and, you know, the label maker, depending on which one you have. Dymo, I don't know what label maker you use, but yeah.
Lee and Freddy, you were both at points part of the Fabulous Five, a graffiti crew famous for painting all 10 cars on a New York City subway line. What is the importance of this particular history to your work on canvas?
Well, the original core group of the Fabulous Five, which consisted of 5 of us, a quintet of painters, had run our course on the subways. And for myself, personally, I felt like I had exhausted everything that I could do in the subways at that point. And that's when I came to meet Fred. And Fred and I were trying to resurrect the group and re-trigger them into a whole new arena of working above ground and on canvas and creating murals and commissions and such. We didn't really succeed at that, though we tried in vain. And for the most part, Fred and I just continued on and having all these ideas come to life and basically addressing them to a whole new theater of operations, I like to say. And so Fred and I just, at that point, just figured out, let's just keep the name going because they're so synonymous with so many murals that were done on the cars, on the subways, that maybe we can bring this above ground into the art scene. So we had many, many ideas that we came across and we sort of shared with each other, we joked about, and hence we, you know, based on the walls that I had painted in 1978, 1979, 1980, we were able to secure our first show in Rome, Italy in 1979. And it was a wonderful moment of inclusion and discovery that we were now arriving as artists above ground.
I just was going to add, like, I guess a part of that whole story of getting to connect with Lee was when I was a kid. I used to go to the museums of the city, kind of cut school, and got very comfortable with the idea of a whole different kinds of painting and painters and the Metropolitan in New York. So I'd kind of developed some of these ideas, and the thing for me was to meet Lee, who was just this outstanding kind of master muralist from the graffiti world, and to bounce these ideas. And so I became like that kind of last member, so to speak, of the Fab Five, and then had these ideas that we can do this thing in a whole other arena, which was, in the art world, to find another audience. And so we came together and had a lot of great ideas and things that we put into effect. This painting that you put up now is one of the early works I made. It was on a piece of steel, and it was kind of giving you the feel. It was inspired by a Charles Demuth painting I would see at the Met. I saw the figure 5 in gold, but then with a lot of wild tags over it, just giving you that calligraphic element that was really a big part of graffiti at that time. And just really an exciting period that Lee and I embarked on. And then really one of our main intents was to open the doors so that other cats from our world, that was something Jean-Michel and I talked a lot about, how can we get some more of us in that space so we can do our thing.
Fab, throwing it back to you, I really wanted to ask you about the Campbell's Soup Car train because we just published an interview, a pretty extensive one with you and Lee, on this landmark mural on a subway for which you covered the entire subway cars with Campbell's soup cans in homage to Andy Warhol. Also effectively calling out to the art world, hey, we know something about art history, and inserting yourself and your fellow graffiti artists, the Fab Five graffiti crew, into that history. How did you see your work in relation to pop art of the 1960s?
Well, that was one of the things that I kind of began to figure out, or kind of see this connection that what had happened in pop art, those artists were inspired by comic books, branding, packaging, things that were popular culture that were all around us. And a lot of graffiti had been inspired by the same things. And then Andy just was such an interesting figure to me, the things he did, the way he did it. And I thought, wow, let's make a statement that lets people know that some of us down there, because there was nothing positive about the work that we were doing then. People that were black and brown, it was almost always negative press whenever you saw us. And I wanted to change that narrative significantly, and talked with Lee about these ideas. And Lee was like, boom. So Lee assisted me because I was kind of learning the techniques working with Lee, but we both were in the tunnels and we put that train up. This was the second version. And believe it or not, it got to run a really long time when many other trains had gotten buffed, meaning like, washed off, like they were done away with. And so that began a part of the plan and the mission that we talked about and were looking to execute. And that was like a swan song, like we're about to step off into another lane. And that led us to this journey that we're still on.
Lady Pink, you have described artists such as John Fechner, Jenny Holter, Keith Haring, and Basquiat as the original street artists who were also seeking new platforms for their work, just like the pop artists had done and just like the graffiti artists were doing. What are the differences for you between what the street artists were doing and what writers like you were doing?
Well, the graffiti writers, and we call ourselves writers, were already a well-formed subculture by the time I joined in '79. It was already a decade old, and we are very tribal. We're like a big dysfunctional family, but you could always find someone that does something of the same thing that you do somewhere that can accompany you out at night on those crazy missions. We specialized in spray paint and fonts and style and lettering that took a really long time to practice to get it out there. And you had a lot of things to learn about sneaking into the subway yards and train tunnels. It's extremely dangerous. Kids have died. So we were a very well-formed subculture. And then came along the street artists who were working in different mediums, different styles. There was Basquiat and Keith Haring doing chalk, and John Fechner with stencils, and Richard Hamilton throwing paint in splats and then making people out of them, and just completely different mediums. Jenny Holzer with the posters. Now, people tried to call Keith Haring and Basquiat graffiti writers, and they resisted. They're like, we're not graffiti writers. We're not like these guys who do lettering and their names in subway trains and such, but they were the original street artists. Now that we have a name for them, folks that work in different mediums, different styles, they go out sometimes on their own because there aren't other people that do the same thing that they do to watch their back and so on. And those are the difference. And street artists are even nowadays legal artists who just do murals out in the street, and they're called street artists. So, you know, labels, go figure.
It's impossible to discuss the post-graffiti movement without acknowledging all of your friend Jean-Michel Basquiat's role in it. So even though he said very clearly he was never part of any graffiti crew, he became a figurehead of the movement. And he was a close friend and collaborator to many of you exhibiting in the same spaces as you, such as the Fun Gallery, New York New Wave at PS1 in the early 80s. Our show in Boston is the first to point out that Basquiat chose to make portraits of Futura, Lady Pink, Fab Five, and other artists in the exhibition who are no longer with us, inscribing you all into this long lineage of important cultural producers of color and documenting his generation. Fab, what was your relationship to Basquiat, and why do you think he became, for so many, a face of this artistic movement?
Yeah, Jean and I were very close. Actually, I was with Lee at one of the first big kind of art parties that we had attended, and Jean-Michel shows up, and we immediately became really close friends. Just an interesting guy, really smart kid, who's sort of like a prodigy in the game. And what we connected on was Jean also, as a young kid, spent a lot of time in museums, and he knew a lot about all these painters. Like, so we could talk about painters from Caravaggio to Barnett Newman, Jackson Pollock. We just went back and forth, but then we also talked about what was going on in these streets. And so the objective was to figure out a way in, and it was like a strategic thing from the jump, like planning, plotting. People like Glenn O'Brien and Blondie, you know, Chris Stein and Debbie Harry from Blondie. It was an amazing scene that embraced us, kind of mentored us, and kind of helped and guided and aided this mission and journey we were on. But Jean had like a unique way to do his thing. He came with it, you know what I'm saying? He just hit the ground running, but very much intent on, you know, making his mark literally and figuratively, but seeing more of us get a shot to come in the door, because it was just like, it was an unheard of thing to have young folks of color, we were extremely young at that time, figure out a way to like be heard. So just a special person, a special time. I really miss Jean, and it's amazing. You know, Jean, once again, I could just say it was all very strategic, how to position oneself and then one's work in the mix to be seen and to be acknowledged. And it's all there. It's almost like a snapshot of how he was thinking. And it's amazing that it continues so long and so strong, you know?
As Black and Latinx artists, what was it like for you to break down so many barriers in the traditionally white enclaves of the art world? Fab, let's go back to you first. Sorry, caught you drinking water.
No, it's okay, you know, mouth is dry. This is exciting. You know, it was just like amazing to see. It was just great that we were able to connect with an open-minded audience at that time, which existed in downtown New York City. It was like a unique time in a unique space. And you know, being among that downtown scene, most people had removed themselves from the quote unquote mainstream world. So you had new wave, punk rock, people that these things are kind of normalized now because you can click, everything's 2 or 3 clicks away. But at that time, everybody in this space, and it wasn't that many of us, not more than 1,000 or so, the fabulous 500, I've heard it referred to, that were pretty much removed from the mainstream world. So being a person of color in that space was unique at that time, but once again, a very embracing crowd of people that supported these ideas and gave us our first shows, the Fun Gallery, you know, the Times Square show, the different groups and organizations that had very open minds. And that was like a unique thing at that time, pre-internet, pre-cable. It was a special time and a special place, and luckily we were able to make a few things happen.
Lee, how about for you? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, just as Fred said, it was a very special time when there was a cross-pollination happening, simply because a lot of these spaces, these alternative spaces and ideas were trying to find an outlet. They were trying to find a substantive, you know, like a place where they could feel that they had some good traction and some good voices. And the galleries were very young themselves. I mean, when you think about the 7-4 Gallery East and the Fun Gallery and even the White Columns Gallery and Collab, all these, and ABC No Real, all these spaces and people behind them that wanted to have an alternative voice box, a soundboard, if you may, to express their ideas, their concerns, their work, share, and you know, have discourse with each other, sometimes heated, just as the graffiti writers did years before at the 149th Street bench, where we all came together to share ideas and inspire each other. So the same thing happened above ground, and it was a beautiful moment. And you have to remember that the dirty word at that time was revisionism. And revisionism is about changing the status quo. And some people were probably not comfortable with that happening to the polished and unpenetrable art world. And here we came from underneath, percolating for a few years, and all of a sudden had an arsenal of work that not only pertained to our conditions, but I would believe the world conditions at large. So I think that at some point, it was undeniable that we were going to make an impact and break through. Sort of like arriving in a Trojan horse and breaking through and getting past the gates. So it was a great magical moment.
Yeah.
And Lady Pink, what was it like being a female artist in this predominantly male scene and environment?
Well, I was lucky to come in the late 70s when the feminist movement was already a decade old or more in America. And the women were feeling brave and strong and fearless. But it was with the support and acceptance of my homeboys, of my friends, of the guys that are speaking here now, that mentored me, that believed in me as a teenager and took me under their wing and included me in all kinds of exhibits and galleries. And my friends took me seriously and took me to paint subway trains and took me around the world and major exhibits and all of that. So being a female wasn't that hard for me. I had good support. I was able to navigate the world, you know, in ways that maybe some guys couldn't. Doors open for a pretty young woman with a brain and talent that sometimes didn't open for guys. And they were a little bit scared of the guys that came from the ghettos and from bad neighborhoods and such. But I was accepted just a little bit better because, you know, ladies are accepted that way if you can dress and behave and all of that. So it's a double standard, I know, but it wasn't that hard. I managed.
Your work often focuses on the female form. For instance, this painting of a nude lounging woman that's in our show. Why is this painting women of interest to you?
Well, women are just easier to paint. I find that they're just round and sexy and sensual and easier. The curves are easier to handle. And guys are harder to paint. They've got muscles and shapes all over. I just can't figure it out. But I love to push forth women's voice, women's issues. And I guess I've been a feminist since I was a teenager. So the activism is never done. We still don't have equal rights in everything, not even the art world. There was, back when we were starting out, there was a group called the Guerrilla Girls, and these were activist women that were protesting the lack of female presence in the above ground art world. So we go from one scene underground to another scene above ground that it has issues as well. There's racism, there's sexism, there's all of that. We've been battling these things for decades and decades, but we've also been fortunate that many doors have opened for us, and we've made the best of what's been given.
You also collaborated with Jenny Holzer, creating works that combined her survival series texts, playing with language, and your own paintings. This was also the subject of a recent interview we published on Art News, so I encourage everyone to read more about it here, but wanted to ask you, how did this collaboration come about, and how was it important for both of your careers?
I think that graffiti writers started collaborating with other artists as we went above ground, and we were meeting people in galleries. And Jenny Holzer invited me to collaborate with her. She would prepare the canvases. I would paint whatever image came to mind that I wanted. And these canvases were very large, almost twice as tall as I am. She would apply her text and truisms to them a little bit later. So I think we gravitated to each other in a kind of sisterhood that is still rare today, as street art women are very rare. So it was a natural collaboration, and we did dozens of paintings that are still circulating today.
At the heart of all of your work was the desire to reject genre boundaries and narrow definitions of what art should be. To that end, you moved between music, visual art, dancing, and more. Futura, how did your art intersect with music?
Yes. Well, initially, we got to go back to, I guess, my experience and relationship with The Clash in '81, which led to some kind of design that I did for an album that they had released. You know, later I did also some graphics a decade later for another label, actually also in the UK, which would have been Mowax. So, and let me not forget, actually, you know, let's take it back to '82, if you will, when Celluloid Records, on the beginning of what I would call our global, you know, journey. Yeah, these records, that's actually Freddy's record. It's called Une sale histoire, a bad story, but a crazy opportunity for us to have done these records. And the reveal is the back of the 5 of them, not the Fab Five, but another quintet of album cover, I guess, backs. And yeah, so that's my first intro to really doing something creative in a 12-inch record, if you will. But yeah, music's important. I think we've all gone in and out of some relationship with musicians and or music. And yeah, I look forward to some future opportunity to do that again.
This incredibly generative wave of art and creativity happened 40 years ago. How do these times continue to impact each of your work today, if at all? What are you working on now? Lee, let's start with you.
Well, currently I'm working furiously in the 9th inning for a show that I'm about to open at the Charlie James Gallery in Los Angeles with a show entitled Black and Blue. And the reason for that title is that I believe the country has been suffering with the black and blue for way too long. And these pieces are becoming more of a testimonial to the times, but also as a retro look into the continual relapse that the country finds itself in, dealing with issues of race and gender and manipulation, and even to a certain extent organized religion. And it's been a very hard show to come together, to come in terms with, because it's really diving deep into the thoughts in my own head, but also around me that are surrounding. So I'm excited that this show is coming aboard, and I'm also working on an interesting project with the Leroy Neiman Center for Print Studies at Columbia University, where we're bringing together a very limited edition box set, if you will, of music that inspired me back in the 70s, which happens to be music scores from famous films back in the day, Isaac Hayes and John Williams and Lalo Schifrin, and even rock and soul and funk. So I'm really excited about that set that will debut sometime later in the year. And I'm also doing a show with Jeffrey Deitch, curating a show at the K11 Foundation in Hong Kong next year during Art Basel Hong Kong. So with brand new paintings and old paintings combined. So those are the three projects that I can talk of right now, but there's many more that are not concrete just yet, but coming together, and those will be exciting to release when they're ready.
Futura, how about you? What's next on deck?
Next on deck is a project, we can call it Futura Land. It's a special event. It'll be within a month's time in Hong Kong. So that's the most immediate project. We've been waiting on that for a while. I'm very excited about that. Just releasing some new creative stuff. Sure will be exciting. Some of which has already gone out. People probably know about some of that. And then there's a exhibition, I guess, in the beginning of August with Murakami-san in Tokyo at the Kaikaikiki Gallery. So I've been prepping for that show at the moment. Luckily, I have more time to work on that than maybe Lee does for his show. But did you see the detail painting there? Wow, Lee, that's remarkable work. The hand, my God. Anyway, Lee's a master. He's always been. There's no question about that. But yeah, I got some stuff going on also, and better to under-promise and over-deliver. That's my motto.
Futura Land, that's where I want to be. Lady Pink, how about you?
Well, I am working as we speak. I see I have two of my guys over there laying down tape on a 1968 Volkswagen van that I am painting for a collector. I am turning it into brick. So right now they're laying down some tape and doing the mortar lines. Then I will spray paint brick and add some graffiti tags and some little tiny pieces. This is what I'm working on immediately. I'm always overbooked with exhibits coming up at the Phillips Gallery, Beyond the Street in China, also at Hong Kong Art Basel that Lee was talking about. It's just always a whirlwind of too many galleries, too many collectors, all asking for our work and our time. It's just never ending. There is no retiring for us. So when you say 40 years of painting, we've still got more work ahead of us.
Fab Five, how about for you?
Wow. This has been fun hanging out with everybody. Still doing this digital Zoom thing. It's really great. And I want to thank everybody who's been hanging out with us, tuning in. I've been furiously working in my studio. I'm back working after the pandemic kind of paused a lot of that for me. I've got some exciting paintings in the work. The imagery of the new work I create the imagery digitally, so that kind of connects lovely for me on this NFT thing which is going on. I've been in crypto for several years now, so I've got some interesting things in that regard coming. Just kind of like an obsessive creator. Film projects, of course, got several interesting things in development. But interestingly, I made this film a couple of years ago called The Grass is Greener, about the history of cannabis in America, its connection to pop culture, particularly music. And then I looked at a lot of the criminal justice stuff, and I focused on a lot of things going on in cannabis around the world, and particularly in New York. Happy that we recently got cannabis legalized in New York. It was only racism that was at the core of the reason why this really beneficial plant has been so stigmatized and so many people's lives have been damaged. So that motivated me, a little entrepreneurial activism. So I have a cannabis product, which is like a cause product in support of those people that have kind of still got nonviolent cannabis arrests. It's just a horrendous thing that needs to be dealt with. So I've got an interesting product coming to the market pretty soon. And so just staying busy and trying to stay out of trouble or stay in trouble.
Good trouble.
Stay in trouble, for sure.
Good
Make
trouble.
Good trouble.
Thank you. Good trouble. Thank you,
That
Lee.
John Lewis trouble.
John Lewis, baby. Good
Exactly.
trouble. We're going to keep on
Gotta
bringing
be.
it. Yes.
That's what we're all
So
about.
now we're gonna
We've
take-
been about that good trouble.
That's right. It don't stop. It don't stop.
No.
That's right, baby. The best is yet
Young
to come,
people
y'all.
out there,
Trust me.
step up.
Step up, y'all. Get with us.
what
and
I'm
thanks,
saying.
Liz. And that
Step
show
up.
at the MFA Boston. Wow. Wow.
Yes, what you all started is truly unstoppable, and I thank you for that. Thank you so much for joining us, our brilliant guests, Lee Quiñones, Lady Pink, Fab Five Freddy, and Futura. The exhibition Writing the Future, Basquiat and the Hip Hop Generation is going to be on view until the 25th of July, so please come and see it. Many thanks to Sotheby's for hosting and Intelligence Squares for their amazing help putting all this together. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Each year, Loewe, one of the world's major luxury houses, creates a project that extends its expertise in leather to a new medium. This year, the house explores the act of weaving with artists from around the world. An interweaving of tradition and experimental techniques sat alongside woven vases, baskets, and bags.